All right. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you all joining us today. I know we've got some folks in the room, and then we've got quite a few folks online right now, which is great. We're excited to host the FedRAMP team here, the Alliance for Digital Innovation. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, we are a 501c6 trade association. We are focused on partnering with government to break down any barriers to entry for commercial technology into the marketplace. Pure and simple. We do a lot with the federal government. We do a lot with state and local government, but we want to make the market as seamless as possible for government to be able to access the commercial technology they need to meet mission and enterprise needs. So that's what we do. We're excited about this discussion today. I was telling somebody beforehand, I'm going to learn about phase 2 and phase 3 in real time up there. So it should be an interesting conversation. We'll talk about some of the rules of the road, but we are going to have a Q&A period at the end, and there are going to be some mics here, so we'll help facilitate that at the end. But without further ado, here's Pete.
How's the microphone? Oh yeah, there we go. If you're here and you don't know me, I'm Pete. I work at FedRAMP, and we're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff today that's coming up. I want to really get some appreciation for Ross and the Alliance for Digital Innovation putting this together for us. We came to him on very short notice and said, we want to do something live. We want to do something public. We want to just not have a bunch of people on a Zoom, see if we can get some people in a room. Will you be willing to set that up? And he was like, yeah, turned around in no time. So really appreciate that. Now, before you are forced to go through what I think is going to be, is it 4 hours of me rambling about whatever I feel like rambling about? I have somebody far more important to introduce to you. Today, you're going to hear from our strong allies in the Office of Management and Budget, who's responsible for the entire federal government's IT, and that is Greg Barbaccia, the federal CIO. Thanks, Waterman.
Hey, everyone, and thank you to our hosts. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I have done FedRAMP in my past life, and what a pain in the butt. So, to be direct, to tell you guys all things that you already know, it often has felt like a gate, not a gateway. It's expensive, it has been slow, and not the direct path we need, or we hoped it would be during its inception. So we heard you, we're working to fix it. We know that if we want the government to accept and adopt incredible technology, we got to meet you halfway, ideally more. So we have to make the process more agile and predictable. So the FedRAMP board and the PMO are acting as a catalyst for our strategic goals. Our job is to simplify the process and create clear signal for all of you. We're focusing on a few key areas that will make it easier for you all to work with agencies to adopt your innovative solutions. I'm going to go through 3 of them. First one, great. Less documentation, more automation. When we apply this even larger at scale at federal IT, it's way easier when we don't have humans having to go through unstructured things. When I could put an input into a system, get a structured output, and get the same structured output 1,000 times, that's awesome. We could deploy technology against that. So we're fully committed to the GSA's 20x initiative. It's about moving from these paper-based compliance processes to automated ones. We want to accept existing commercial frameworks and documentation, saving you time, saving you money. And we're building this for automation so you could do it once, deploy it many, many different times across different agencies. Number 2, super important for you guys, clear demand signals from us. We're actively prioritizing tech that agencies need and want most. We've been working with the CIO Council, which I chair, to identify a top-tier list of services, including conversational AI engines. If your product is in high demand and meets our criteria, we will make sure it gets the attention it deserves. This is our way of telling you exactly what the government wants. Too much guesswork is done in the early stages of R&D. And then finally, something that should be music to everybody's ears, the presumption of adequacy. We want to make it easier for agencies to choose an authorized product. When you get a FedRAMP authorization, we're not just giving you a security badge, we're creating this presumption of adequacy for agencies to rely on. This means agencies will accept the work you've already done to secure your product, and will have a clearer, faster path to reuse and scale across the government once it's on the marketplace. There are a lot of cultural things we need to do in the government to try to make this easier for people. We need to trust one another. I promise you, I'm working very hard to get these cultural changes in place so we could put these procedural changes in place for reuse. So we're doing our part to improve the process, but we still need your partnership. We need you to keep innovating. We need you to engage with the PMO and with your agency partners. Bring us your best products, work with us on your use cases. The more we can align, the faster we get cutting edge tech into the hands of government workers. We promise you, we are taking everything we're hearing from industry and from the field to heart, and we are completely moving mountains to make this process much, much better. It's one of the things coming into this role I was super excited about. It is other than, cybersecurity, which everybody's talking about, this is probably the number one thing I heard from my friends in industry. We got to make this easier to get in. And now so much of tech is commoditized. I think there's 700 million just ChatGPT users worldwide. Something like 29 million of those are using to write code. So with all this vibe coding, it's easy to write new software, but we need to give you the demand signal of what we're looking for, and we need to make it easier. If you could vibe code a product that's interesting and you're one person, it's still impossible if you can't get it into the government and figure out how to get sponsored. So we're always ready to work with you to make this a true gateway for innovation, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you all very much.
Hello? Can you, there we go.
Oh,
All right, so this next section, we're going to go through, again, we're not at Pete's going to take us through phase 2 and phase 3 here in a little bit, but beforehand, we wanted to kind of set the stage, and I wanted to ask Pete a bunch of questions about the last 6 months, where we are now, what's going on. So, welcome. Thank you for joining. Before we jump into everything, you've had a clear approach from day one, and it would be good to talk to us about a number of things, but set the stage on what your overarching vision is, what the goal in mind that you're developing it towards looks like, and set the scene for us over the last 6 months.
yeah. So for me, I had a kind of a clarifying experience last week. This time a week ago, I was in the intensive care unit at Washington Center Hospital recovering from emergency stent put in as a result of a heart attack, which was completely unexpected, didn't make any sense to me. And as I was recovering there, because that's just the way I am, all I could think about was how I need to 20x my health. Like, that's what I need to do. And the thing is, like, traditional compliance, what most of us are used to in this space, it's about setting a bar that becomes the minimum bar. And you can have another bar, but that becomes the minimum bar. And that's all that we've been doing for a long time, is really just hitting this minimum bar. And we all know it doesn't work. We all know that it's not actually causing us to secure everything the way that we need. We read about this all the time. Well, it's not a FedRAMP requirement to do this, so we're not going to do it, right? And it happens, and it causes problems. And my health was kind of like that, in that I was good. I was exercising for an hour a day. I was eating pretty well. I was starting to lose weight. I was doing all right, but that wasn't enough, right? I was hitting a bar, but I wasn't setting goals for myself. I wasn't trying to focus on what I needed to do for myself. And for me, that's what 20x is. And I want us to all think about this today during this conversation and then take this home in the future. The concept behind FedRAMP 20x, especially the key security indicators, is that it is a framework for you and your business to determine what are your security goals. How do you want to meet them? How do you want to measure them? And then hold yourself accountable by validating them and using them. And then you share that with your customers and with FedRAMP and with the government. And we make decisions about using your product based on your goals for yourself. So you can be rewarded if you have strong security goals. If you truly care about security, you should be rewarded. If you just want to meet a bar, what's the point? You can still tell us that you don't care about your security, and we'll let that happen. Well, no. So think about this. Throughout this whole day, the thing that we learned the most in phase one, and the thing that we want to really just drive home, is to stop thinking about FedRAMP as a compliance bar where you hit the minimum, and then you're in, and then you're done, and then you're fine. This is not what it's about. FedRAMP is a tool for you as a business to set goals for yourself and assess your progress and success towards them.
All right. Well, let's get into the 6-month overview then in a little more detail. So starting with the PMO and the team. You guys have had some leadership changes, whether it's at the top of GSA or across the government in different places. I want to know, how is the team doing? You recently added some new people. How is the hiring going? What are the new folks working on? And then with leadership changes at GSA, are you getting the continued support for FedRAMP 20x that you have had over the last, at least at the beginning of the 6 months?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. A little interesting story here. Back in December, about 4 months into my role in this job, I was very seriously considering quitting because I did not feel like there was sufficient support from the GSA to make this system, make this program successful. It was a real problem. That changed under new leadership, and that has consistently continued to be the case. I talked more with the previous acting GSA administrator on a week-to-week basis than I ever spoke with the previous GSA administrator. It's about, they care about technology. And then, this week we had the gentleman that will soon be my boss's 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 boss show up at our FedRAMP day for agencies and show his support there and send me a DM about how impressed he was with my team. This is the type of support that is real. And on top of that, we have the federal CIO over at OMB. This is like, Greg's not here just saying talking points because his staff convinced him to come. He's here because he cares about this in a way that hasn't always been the case in the past. And that means a lot to me. So I think as far as support to make change, yeah, we're good. As far as my team hiring, that's tough. We're in a tough situation. That's probably going to be one of our biggest problems over the next few months is trying to figure out how to do that. But we have been able to grow. We've brought on a few more contractors. We brought on some amazing, incredible folks from the U.S. Digital Corps, from within the technology transformation services. And we grew 30%, 25% from where we were in July when we were down to 20 people. So I'm excited. All
right. Okay. So over the last 6 months, you guys have done a lot to communicate with us all, right? And it's been new, interesting pathways of communication. You guys are on GitHub constantly. I mean, I could go there any hour of the day and find somebody able to reply, which is fantastic, and we really appreciate it. You guys have published 17, I think it was 17 RFCs at least for comment.
Sounds right.
And what are some of the key policies and some of the key highlights from those 17 RFCs that you've published? How's the process been working? Could you guys open it up to public comment? Every single one of them is open up to public comment. And then are there any live that you guys have published fully that you are still taking feedback based on pilots or whatever in the process and making updates to?
Yeah, start at the end. So right now there's 4 RFCs, there's 4 policies open for comment. Those are all part of our 20x phase 2. They will align with the next phase. There's 2 of them that will very much be a part of Rev 5 going forward. And if you don't know what those are, go check them out later. I'm not going to go through them all because there's so many of them. But the thing is, like, when you go look at those policies, when you look at the things that we've put out for 20x, and that we're balance improvement releasing through to Rev 5 slowly and carefully and intentionally, you look at these final components that are out here for draft. And I've pretty firmly believed that over the last 6 months, we have proposed a solution to every single systemic problem that existed in FedRAMP. Now, it's one thing to propose a solution. It's one thing to create a rule. One of the things that I learned very early on was that some of you don't like the opportunity to change really fast because that's confusing and hard. You don't have budget for it, et cetera. So it's going to be a minute as we start to adopt this wider and move forward. But what you have today in front of you, in those RFCs, and the ones that we've produced before, and the ones that we've turned around and created as standards, and the ones that we will continue to evolve over the course of time, is solutions that we and you have to figure out how to take advantage of, how to implement. And I think that's like ultimately, as far as like getting work done in 6 months, solving almost every systemic problem. So let's talk about what am I talking about? Solving every systemic problem. Okay. So how about the fact that under our significant change notification standard, you no longer have to ask for permission to operate your business and do the things that you want to do for your business. Under the vulnerability detection and response standard, you are empowered to focus on the real security problems in your environment and not do a bunch of weird government paperwork. And POAMs are gone. They just, oof, that's for the government to do. That's not for you. The minimum assessment standard simplifies what is in your boundary. It allows you to use non-FedRAMP authorized services, which some parts of FedRAMP already allowed before, but now it's very explicit and clear. As long as you document your controls and your mitigations and why that's necessary and what the risk is, you're good to go. We've got significant, or sorry, I already did significant change. There's continuous collaboration monitoring. That's when RFCs is out right now. That's changing up the game entirely. We have
Trust centers.
yeah, authorization data sharing. This is a whole different approach. Like this makes it really clear to you that you own your data. Like, I'm sorry, there was a lot of confusion for a long time. Your system security plan is your proprietary information. You own that. It's not FUI. It's not government-owned information. It's your business information. I'm sorry that that was on a template, but you should have, it is yours. And we make that clear in that standard. So as we go forward, I think that we're going to see a pretty strong shift in Rev 5 under those standards as we start to balance those out and you start to kind of get comfortable with it. And that's a pretty big win.
Well, one of the things that I appreciate is the process that you're doing this by, right? With the pilots and the closed betas and the open betas. So staying with RFCs for a second, over the last 6 months, there are several standards that have been turned on. They're turned on. How many of those open pilots or closed pilot interactions have led to or are leading to potential continued evolution of some of those standards?
I mean, everything.
Okay.
Right? Like you start with the RFC itself. I'll just say, like, how many of you have submitted a comment on an RFC and then seen a final standard come out that maybe you think might have incorporated your comment? Yeah, I can assure you that even when you submit a comment that does not lead to a direct change, it leads to an indirect change elsewhere. And what we see is you can ask for a lot from us. We'll do our best to meet that. But as we make changes, it's not just, oh, these 3 people asked for this, these 5 people asked for this, I'm going to choose which one I like, right? It's about finding something that makes sense with everyone, finding the real problem under there. And I mean, Ross, we had a conversation with some folks where they were talking about vulnerability reporting. And at the time, I was pretty much like, yeah, sorry, I don't think we're going to change the way that this is happening. And they submitted comment, and there was a lot of other people that submitted a similar comment. And in that process, we spent a lot of time soul searching about, do we need to require a business to report the very specific CVE that is in their system? No. And we decided not to. And so now you don't have to tell us that. You just have to tell us how it will affect us. And I think that's a lot more reasonable. And that's something that it doesn't happen when the government just sits by itself in the corner. Like we'll get some okay things, but nothing like that. So it's not just the public comment. It's events like this. It's the questions you ask here. It's the things that you post on LinkedIn, your blog posts that I read, your random YouTube things that I find. Like we get this information everywhere, and that is what makes us be responsive to you. And it's the same with agencies too. We work so much within the government, and that's how we can chart this course, where I could not think of a single thing that I could propose that I could get every single person in this room to agree with. But the fact that we can come up with things that every single person in this room is like, okay, I mean, let's go. That's pretty cool.
So you've been working in the pilot programs with different types of companies. In some cases, you have CSPs that have one commercial cloud solution that they're trying to bring through as a FedRAMP cloud solution offering. You have managed security service providers that are coming in that are providing FedRAMP services to ease the pathway into market. Are you learning? What are you learning from the pilot programs that you can share? And how do you see different companies' approach to the market informing the process?
So I'll tell you what, one thing we learned was that a lot of you still want to do compliance. And you can get real excited about something that says it's not compliance and still go at it exactly like it's compliance. We have submissions that are just, it's clear they just went through the KSIs one by one, or like, this is this. We have people that pulled stuff from their existing system security plans. We had auditors that included screenshots of evidence. It was quite a mixed bag. But on the flip side, we had all of these incredible people that wanted to break that mold and wanted to see it differently. And they started to think, and you could kind of see there's like a little bit of compliance in there. You know, they're not quite brainstorming everything that you possibly can, but they're at least taking a slightly different approach. And as we saw that, it became very clear that in phase 2, we needed to set some very explicit parameters to focus that, use it as a framework to improve your security. Don't use it as a framework to show that you are compliant with a bar. So for me, that was the biggest thing. The second thing was just that, wow, is there a need for this? The fact that 26 companies paid for a 3PO assessment of a thing that didn't exist, of like what is the 3PO assessment? I don't know. You guys let me know how you're doing. Let me know what that looks like. And then, invested in it and put the time together to submit a package for a pilot with no guarantees of anything. That is insane. 26, that is more systems than the JAB authorized in the last 3 years combined that it was active. And y'all turned that around in a month and a half, 2 months for a pilot. Now, some of them are still going through review because we did not expect 26 of those folks. That was a lot. So that's, I think, the big takeaway through this is that we still need to shift the mentality, but people are ready for it and they want to try to approach it. And the demand is hot. So we got to keep going and we got to focus on delivering this quickly and effectively.
One more question about the 20x piece, and then we'll switch to Rev 5 here in a second. But on the 20x piece, there's some things that have kind of sprung up as part of the process, right? And we talked about this earlier, but the POEM for POEMs piece, help me understand. Tell me a little bit about that, but more, are there things that you're discovering through the interactions that you're having that are coming up that are problems that you are feeling compelled to solve on behalf of the entire ecosystem?
I'm going to take that in a slightly different direction, which is that when I started, far before I started, because it was a government job, so I knew I was going to have the job like half a year before I started. One of the things that became very, very clear to me was that FedRAMP was not at the center of FedRAMP. FedRAMP was off somewhere over here, and there was all these competing people and companies. They were all kind of the gravity around which FedRAMP was operating, and trade associations and things like that. There wasn't a central core. There wasn't like an ownership of what FedRAMP was. And that was one of the things I really wanted to change. And that, I think FedRAMP should be at the center of FedRAMP. That all of you should orbit around us. In order to do that, we have to be more active than you. We have to participate in public. We have to be willing to talk about what's going on, how we're building things, what we're doing, so that we can make it about us. And that creates a gravity where we can then start to take in that additional feedback and that additional stuff and improve everything. And so at the beginning of your question, I was just thinking about specifically the POEM for POEMs. It's such an example of a thing where at any point in time, we could have done something about that. but it was always,
Somebody else's problem.
yeah, like how do we do this? It's an O&B memo from the year 2001. Like it's doesn't like I don't want to take on this problem, right? But when you're at the center of this and you start making all these changes and you're seeing everything just ties back to this little thing, and it's like, okay, Pete, thanks. You solved the 8 problems that were really frustrating me, but here's this 9th one. Here's this thing. And it's able, like it takes us, because we're at the center, instead of us saying, I don't care, this is the rule, just follow it. We get to say, oh no, we don't want that. We don't like that. And so like the poem, I mean, that thing was amazing, right? Like we, over the course of 2 months, basically said, this is a problem. I think it was a CSBAB meeting where I came home from it. I was like, we need to actually put in the work on poems. Let's figure it out. I did a ton of research to understand what was actually going on behind poems. Because like everyone else that works in the government, you think, oh, I have to do a poem. It's like the law or something. No. Also, it's agencies that do. Anyway, the whole thing is totally crazy. It's for a whole totally different purpose. So we dug into that. We figured out the reasons for it. We tried to figure out why people were doing it. We went to all of the NIST stuff that talked about it and the way that it's not used in the way that it's supposed to be used. And then we went to our Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee. We had them talk about some stuff. And the end result was he came out of it with this update to this vulnerability detection and reporting standard. It's basically just like the concept is gone. If you want to accept a weakness, you can accept a weakness. You then tell your customers what the impact to them might be. And your customers then decide if they think it's cool that you're doing that or not. And then they leave your service if they don't think it's cool.
Look, I think we're in a different spot than we were 12 years ago when FedRAMP was or 13, how many years ago when FedRAMP was first stood up to
17,000.
Well, but it was, I mean, we put our mind in 2011, right? People were just entering into use of cloud infrastructure for the first time. And they needed a way to figure out how to accept that risk associated with it. So a process was developed. And I think that what we've seen now is this moment in time, you are taking a look at all of the processes that underpin that broad digital transformation, and you're seeing some that make sense and some that don't. And I think the Poem for Poems is a great example of one where you're saying, okay, let's take a look at this process and see if we can streamline it to fit the direction that we're going to allow more robust use of all of the cloud technology that's out there right now. So we appreciate that, and we look forward to where
It's
that
important to just like, I say this a lot, but I think it's really important. When I talk about FedRAMP of the past, I'm not talking about how anyone chose to run that program before. That original memo from 2011 was very strict. And it said, you got to basically just treat every single commercial cloud service as if they're a government program, right? That was what the original FedRAMP was designed for. It wasn't until the FedRAMP Authorization Act that we started to get the authority and the freedom to make these approaches. And so now we can change this process because Congress gave us the authority to create the new process.
All right, let's pivot a little bit. We've got a lot of people who have done FedRAMP Rev 5 and continue to do FedRAMP Rev 5. Of the 17 RFCs that are out there, how many of those are applicable to the Rev 5 process today? And I mean, if you can tell us which one's great, if not, going forward, what can folks who are operating under the Rev 5 process expect as we move beyond phase 1 into 2 and 3?
Yeah, so before we get into specifics about the policies and the standards themselves, let's talk about the concept of the balance improvement. So originally, when we started on this journey 6 months ago, and I sat here in front of you at the time, my direction was to effectively deprioritize to the maximum extent possible any improvements to Rev 5. It was create a new market, new service that would replace that. And over time, as things started to bed in a little bit more, and we started to talk about how it would affect you and how it wouldn't, we got support to change that up and put a little bit more effort into Rev 5. It's just to take a single moment, if the goal is to get to, let's say, 3,000 cloud services in the FedRAMP marketplace in 4 years, then the Rev 5 services, of which there's 450 or so right now, are a tiny fraction. So it makes sense not to be focused on how to make those better when we're building something new. So what we did was we took this approach of considering that 20x that every standard we produced for that was based on a problem that existed with Rev 5. So it would be kind of unfair to just let 20x folks take advantage of those changes in the rules and in the requirements and in the recommendations. And so we took this approach of balanced improvement, where as things immediately apply to 20x, they will slowly apply to Rev 5. And initially, all application of Rev 5 is opt-in. Nobody, like FedRAMP is not telling anyone that has their current authorization to spend a single dollar to do anything different. I would like you to all spend those dollars, but I would like you to do that because it's in your interest, because these new policies are better for you and in a way and a time that's appropriate and makes business sense for you. So as far as like what policies apply and how that works. So basically when we release a standard, it says what our intention is for it to apply to Rev 5 or not. So the minimum assessment standard is an example of, I think, possibly the first one that we weren't sure how to apply that to Rev 5 because that is effectively a new way of thinking about your boundary. And what we didn't want was everyone to just be like, I have to create a new boundary. I have to go through new, like that would be insane. So we came up with this idea of beta releases. And the concept is you come to us. If you are a Rev 5 provider that wants to use that and support you through that. Significant change notifications is a slightly different example, where that was a big change for a lot of government agencies. A lot of government agencies didn't like the idea of a cloud service provider making changes without asking them for permission in advance. So we partnered with agencies that were okay with it. And we worked with a few, and right now that's in a closed beta with a few cloud service providers. I think it's going really well. We're about to open that up to open beta. And then everything from there just goes on. The things that I'm really excited about are the authorization data sharing standard, which lets you adopt your own trust center and totally changes the rules so you can get your information out of Connect. The vulnerability detection and response, that you got to start taking a look at that. We're gonna do closed beta soon and then go straight to open beta like real fast. Like these are things that they're on you to adopt as you want to do it, but they are out there and they solve your problems. So how do you figure out if it applies to you? Right now, this is a little bit awkward. You can go to github.com/FedRAMP/docs. That's our repository that has our machine readable documentation. Or you can check out fedramp.gov/20x/standards, because these are all originally 20x standards. And as you click into each of them, it will tell you right at the top, there's an applicability section that will tell you how and when it applies to Rev 5 and what you need to do if you want to use it.
Appreciate that. I want to touch on one thing that you said about, as Rev 5, people who have Rev 5 are looking at adopting standards as it makes sense to them. Part of the underlying driver for that is agency risk acceptance and agency use of the 20x process broadly. And that includes everything from automation and opening up APIs so that you can have a machine-to-machine interaction, all the way to accepting more risk associated with a 20x authorization. So how are you guys working with agencies right now? And that's GSA, it could be at OMB, to help drive some of that risk, whether it's risk acceptance or risk change in perspective.
There's kind of two things at play there, right? There's agency culture, which Greg talked about, and that's something to work on. And then there's tooling. And so I'll talk about tooling first, which is we've all spent a lot of time talking about automation, machine readable data, blah, 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 magic, wave your wand. But agencies don't have a way to consume machine readable information. Most of you don't have a way to produce the machine readable information that you need in the format that you need. So what are we talking about here? Everybody's just waiting for FedRAMP to magically figure out some way to do this. So what we're trying to solve this problem for agencies by prioritizing tools that will provide the capabilities that agencies need under 20x. And part of what made that really weird, by the way, was just that some of these tools, they're primarily going to be used by other cloud services to help them create their data. So a government agency might not need it, so they couldn't find a sponsor. So that's why we made sponsorship go away. because we need those services in here to be used by cloud services and by agencies. So that's a big part of what phase 2 is going to be focused on, and we'll talk a bit about that. But the idea is that by March, we want tools available consistently to agencies so they can start pulling this information in. Culture. Agencies are going to change slowly. You should expect that, but that's okay, because the things that they're afraid of, we just had a FedRAMP day, you know, and the first question was like, what do I do when GAO comes and says, why are you doing it this way? And I'm like, well, what you should be afraid of is what GAO, when they come and they say, why aren't you following the law to use the FedRAMP process? But that hasn't settled into agencies yet. It's all about time. Like, it takes time, and there hasn't been a process. There hasn't been this thing. So as we build the tools, as we prepare and change and make things real, we'll see changes. So it's a long-term play. Then we have our friends at OMB, and we have this incredible demand for emerging technology. How do we get that in there faster? And it becomes the exact problem, right? We have some of the biggest, highest growth technology companies in the world today that didn't want to do FedRAMP. And they tried to make it go away so that they could go around it. And now they are doing FedRAMP because it is the best way for them to get into the government. And it is FedRAMP 20x because it's a way that makes sense. Because it's a way that makes sense for cloud services, and it's a way that makes sense for agencies, because agencies cannot spend $300,000 every time they want to use some cloud service. So we have to make it easier. We have to give them that top cover. We have to educate folks on the law and on policy and how it affects them and how this stuff. And we have to encourage people to stop making statements about what they can or can't do based on something they heard 15 years ago.
And frankly, we're excited to see some of the OneGov announced AI solutions really kind of rapidly make their way through the process and be deployed. I think a lot of people in here are enthusiastic about that process driving change more broadly. One more tough question before we get to the FedRAMP announcements for phase 2 and phase 3. For better or worse, and I know this is not your remit, you can't necessarily do anything about it, but I have to ask it anyway. A lot of folks in here, when they look at going into the public sector marketplace, they think about federal civilian and DoD as one entity, and you still have a process that is a little bit detached from the direction that 20x is going. Is there any hope you can give us about any discussions, any consolidation, any potential movement in a similar direction?
Imagine in private sector if you were offered an opportunity to align on security in a way that meant 400 of the top Fortune 500 companies would accept the output of it. Would you take that? Would you be happy with that? I think the answer is yes for most of you. So the reality is that the Department of Defense, the DODs now,
Oh, sorry.
the Department of War, the DODs, they have their own way of doing things. They have their own mission. Their mission is different. It is like expecting a technology company to treat your thing the same way a manufacturing company would treat your things. They are different. The priorities are different. The mission is different. The expectations are different. You should not. This is me saying this, not as a person that is in charge of anything at the Department of the DODs, but like, you generally should not expect that you can go through and just magically get access to a far more controlled market as commercial. What we're trying to do in the civilian side is get commercial tools into government. We want federal agencies to get access to commercial tools. The DODs, that is not, to some degree, that is on their priority. To other degrees, it's not, but that's up to them how they're going to do that. So don't come into FedRAMP expecting that it's going to get you all 500 of the Fortune 500, and that's probably the best way to start. And honestly, if it gets you 50, that's pretty sweet. Because like, the government is a bunch of different companies. And it's always been a little confusing to me, the way that we kind of think, oh, if one person in the government uses it, then it's everybody else can just use it. Like everybody's different. Everybody's got different reasons. So let's make it as simple as possible for people with those different reasons, with those different missions, to make the decisions they need to make, whether or not to adopt your services. That's what FedRAMP's here for.
All right. Well, we'd love to hear about what's next on phase 2 and phase 3. And then whenever after you're done your presentation, we'll open it up to questions from folks in the audience. And I'd like to give just a little bit of a preamble before we fully open it up.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
I need like a time check. How much time do I have?
You have probably about 15 minutes, 10,
All right.
15 minutes.
I don't want to stand at the podium. Can I? All right. All right. Am I mic'd up? All right. Okay. Y'all have been here before if you're paying attention to FedRAMP. All the information we're going to share here today, everything I've already said, everything I will say, subject to change, check back regularly for the latest update. I would strongly encourage you, if you care about the week to week, to pay attention to our roadmap. That's at fedramp.gov. There's a button in the corner, take you to the roadmap. It's on GitHub. We update it every 2 weeks. It's a public working roadmap. It shows both the effects of continuous delivery and improvement, as well as responding to changing requirements and real world impacts. Take a look at it. On the other hand, you do not need to be up here looking at what's happening with FedRAMP every 2 weeks. We're doing a thing that's going to last 5 years. So you can kind of calm down if you want to. Let's talk about what that looks like. I'm going to throw out some numbers for you. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the year. Last year, so for those of you that don't know, we're a couple days away from the end of the year as far as the fiscal year. So it's fiscal year 25. We're ending right now. FedRAMP started that with a $22 million budget. That budget was reduced to $11 million in January, and we are on target to come in just a little bit over that $11 million spent. Our staff went from 80 down to 20, back up to 28. Budget next year, also $10 million. Allocation for staff, we're targeting 43. Hiring is hard. It is complicated. We don't know if we're going to get there. It will affect our ability to deliver. Full stop. Right now we have 28. We'll see what we can do. Also, I started FY25 2 months after I started with a goal of 50 authorizations per year, which at the time, just counting PMO, I think hadn't been done for like 4 years. It was a big deal to target 50. We've done 130 plus this year. We have completely blown up the backlog and moved through and beyond. Next year, I expect probably around 100, not because that's what our throughput will be, but because that's how many packages I expect. There's just not going to be that much more Rev 5 coming in. I also had a target of 5 program authorizations, which was crazy because that was a very expensive and complicated process. Now it is a much more chill process under 20x. So we've done 12 of those, and we expect to do 150 or more. And yes, that's a made up number, but that's because we estimate we can handle that throughput once we have things more refined. Okay, so what's the plan then? Great. Well, you guys all remember phase 1. We're at the end of it right now. We're transitioning into phase 2. Phase 2 is a moderate pilot. We're going to focus that on AI and GRC automation capabilities with early agency adoption. Phase 3 at the beginning of next year will be the formalization of low and moderate. We're going to do that together and create a formal path. And we will start pushing wide-scale agency adoption. At the end of next year, a year from now, time goes really fast when you just put quarters and chunks on a slide deck. A year from now, we expect to start the 20x high pilot. We want that to be focused on the hyperscale IaaS PaaS in the room, right? We want to start bringing the big players forward into 20x. By the end of next year, a success measurement for us will be that every single agency has access to every single AI and GRC automation tool that they need to go about their daily lives. Then we keep going. By halfway through FY27, we expect to require every single one of you to have moved to a machine readable format if you're still on Rev 5. That's a long time, but that is a big lift for a lot of people. Think about this a little bit like the Rev 4 to Rev 5 transition. If you're going to stick around on Rev 5, you need to be machine readable. The tools exist. Agencies will have the tools. If you're not going to be machine readable, I'm not even saying that we're going to turn off your FedRAMP authorization. Probably nobody's going to want to use you anymore. Finally, 2 years from now, or actually, sorry, the bolded part of this slide. At that time, we expect to stop doing new Rev 5 authorizations at low and moderate. At that point, I expect the reason that we'll be doing that is because demand has just tapered off and is gone. So why would we? And we'll just make it official. 2 years from now, full stop, Rev 5's gone. So there's a few hundred of you still on it, and we figure out what we're going to do with you. I don't know what that's going to look like. 2 years is a long ways from now. All right. So where are we at now? Taking this from 2 years back to today. Okay. Phase 2 starting shortly. There are changes into this moderate pilot than what we discussed before. In response to changing requirements, in response to what we've learned from phase 1, as we've always said, we will iterate and improve. Phase 2 will not be open to the public. We will be targeting approximately 10 pilot authorizations. Okay, Pete, who's going to participate then? I'll tell you about that in a second. It's going to run from mid-October to mid-December. It will have much stricter requirements, especially for automation. Screenshots not accepted. Much stricter requirements. There's RFCs on that right now that you can go read. The expectation is that you really lean into the vision of 20x. Every single recommendation and requirement for 20x must be addressed. That means not just the KSIs. The KSIs are the core, but they're not the process wrapped around it for FedRAMP, right? It's, are you doing your significant change notifications? It's everything else. There's 150, 200 FedRAMP rules, requirements, recommendations across all standards that you're going to have to address in some way. And we learned a little bit from the first time around and more explicitly defined the assessment approach. You see that in the RFC. I'm really excited to hear the feedback on that. The concept behind 20x assessments that is different from before is really simple. We don't want your third-party assessor making a decision about whether or not you are good enough for FedRAMP. What we want is your third-party assessor verifying that you are actually doing the stuff that you say you're doing and that it's working in the way that you think it's working. It's a slightly different model. But that's what happens when you have the freedom, right? To meet a KSI, you don't need to do a specific thing and have an assessor check, did you do the thing? You say, I meet this KSI by doing this. Here's a thing. Here's how I'm meeting this goal. Here's the evidence of it. Here's how it's validated. And have them make sure that that's real and that works and that you're not just pretending. Finally, we're going to be a little hardcore in that if people race and try to be the first submitter and they submit a package that isn't super great, you're effectively going to be disqualified from the rest of the pilot because you're wasting the government's time. And I say that because I know that some of you are racing. And what I want you to do is I want you to race for the best package, not the first package. Because if you're planning on submitting on October 28th or something, you're wrong. You're not going to be ready for that. Don't try. So plan for the best package. So who's allowed to participate in phase 2? Anyone that submitted a complete package for phase 1 that wasn't rejected or withdrawn, you're in. We're going to be meeting with pretty much all of you on Friday, I think, to talk about the next steps on that. You can have a shot. You can also walk away with your low authorization and wait for moderate to be formalized. In fact, my recommendation, not giving anyone business advice, but to me, it would make more sense if folks who are to walk away, take the low, wait for the moderate to be formal. Other folks that are going to be able to participate are people that meet all of FedRAMP's AI prioritization criteria. FedRAMP.gov/AI. This criteria is deeply, deeply difficult to meet, and it comes with some very special white glove treatment. Third, perhaps most important, we're going to make an exception. If you have GRC automation capabilities in your system, in your service, that are designed for 20x, so that means you're going to have to demonstrate how you implement the authorization data standard, how you consume significant change notifications, stuff like that. That's a little awkward right now because there aren't any standards for how to do any of that. So it means you're going to have to collaborate with some of the other folks that are also in 20x, figure out how to do that together. But we'll listen, we'll let you in because we want those tools in the government. Finally, FedRAMP compatible trust centers. If you weren't in the first one, you got an opportunity in this one. If you don't know what a FedRAMP compatible trust center is, it's because you haven't looked at the authorization data standard, and you should do that because it is not your typical trust center. There are additional requirements. Why? Why do we make these changes? Focus on quality over quantity. We got too many submissions in the first round. We weren't prepared for it. We didn't have the staff for it, and too many of them were not good enough, and they took a lot of our time, and it took us a lot of time. And that's my bad. That's not your bad. I said, send me something and we'll look at it. And y'all did. So thank you so much for participating, but we can't have that again, especially because everybody keeps telling me they were waiting for moderate. If we get like 80 moderate submissions in the pilot, I'm like, what's the point? Now we're back to a bigger queue than I had last year. I also want to make sure that if you're in phase one and you want to walk away with your low, that we can finish your low for you. And that's going to be hard to do if we're reviewing a whole bunch of moderates. Finally, let's just talk about realistic targets. Right? We need to finalize these. We need to make this a formal path. In order to do that, I need to not be buried under a whole bunch of reviews. And so I need to create some space. That's why we're going to be limiting this. Our team is so focused on continuing to review these pilot authorizations that we're not able to sit down and put the time and effort into taking what we've learned and documenting that for everyone else. So we're going to try to do that this month, and then we're going to do that in phase 3 as just an explicit carve out. 2 months, leave us alone. We're going to go close the door in our cave, and we're going to figure out how to make this thing real. Okay, phase 3. Just talked about that. Consolidate learnings, formalize the structure, and hopefully train new staff. A big part of phase 3 is going to be FedRAMP board support. We need, oh man, I forgot to send Ross a new deck. It's fine. There's supposed to be a bullet point at the top here, which is that we will be looking to constantly work with the FedRAMP board to assure that the requirements and guidelines that we put out meet the FedRAMP board's expectations. That is a key thing that's just so like no duh for me that I didn't put it on the deck the first time. Until Ryan was like, yo, you should say that. And I was like, okay, sure. We also are going to be working with the board, with OMB, to ensure that every CFO Act agency will have completed an initial 20x reuse, hopefully by the end of this quarter. Now that is crazy. So you just take a step back. We'll see if we deliver that or not. But for all of you that are talking about, the doubts and adoption, when you have some of the most in-demand technology services in the government all coming through FedRAMP 20x to be reused by every CFO Act agency, in 3 months, you'll know that we're there. All right? The board's also going to be working on playbooks, worksheets, other materials for agency reuse. Agency reuse is a key problem. It is a key focus. But again, we need something for them to reuse. And we need a way for them to reuse it. We don't have that right now. So we're building that. We're preparing that. And then we keep building. I sat up here on this stage 6 months ago, and I told you this was our North Star. A world where we could just have code that says, you're good. It's still our North Star. It's still what we're building towards. It's not going to look like that. We all know that. But that's the mental model. I should be able to just look at a service, I look at a rating, at a score, understand their security, see things I like, see things I don't, and decide whether or not to use it without having to read through hundreds of pages of materials. Because we can do that. So that's phase 2 and 3.
All right. So here's how we're going to do questions, folks. We've got 2 microphones, one on either side. Come on up, stand in line. We'll take questions for the next probably 20 minutes or so. Introduce yourself and let Pete know where you're at, okay? Are we lined up here? Mats, you're up for a question? All right, go ahead. Introduce
Thank you.
yourself.
So I'm Mats Nalinder with Sunstone Secure, and I have a question about that North Star. So the assessments, if we can do them fully automatically, will FedRAMP still require that there be a manual audit parts or interviews, or can we do it fully automatically?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've outlined in both the significant change notification standard, which is public and is formalized, and we've also put in the persistent validation and assessment for 20x that was just released a couple of weeks ago, is the idea that what assessors are assessing is your pipeline, your code, your processes. So that means if you build a system that will deploy something, then you can use that 18,000 times to deploy something without having to have that assessed. What needs to be assessed is your code. And so as that changes, yes, you need assessment. And so we've outlined a concept called persistent FedRAMP assessment, where changes to those need to be assessed on a recurring basis. And that assessment will be more frequent as the impact level goes up. So at low, it might be every 12 months, at moderate, every 9 months, at high, perhaps every 3 months. But we're not talking about an old-time assessment. We're not talking about a sit-in-a-room assessment. We're talking about these are the changes that were made. This is how they might impact the security of our service. Please verify that these are working the way that we think they're working.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Pete. Thank you for doing this. My question piggybacks off of what Ross said around the DOW and the end of reciprocity, which is shame. Fully hear you that it's a different mission. They got to do what they got to do. That said, in the civilian community, you have the intelligence community, you have the DHS. Frankly, you have financial agencies like Treasury, you have healthcare agencies like HHS, right? Like these are all folks who would argue their data is highly sensitive and who are looking at what DOW is doing and, questioning, well, is this going to work for me? And so what my question is both to you and, maybe even somewhat to the FedRAMP board is, how are you all engaging those agencies? Because there's a lot of us in this room who have those as sponsors, DHS, Treasury, HHS, VA, and we're just not seeing it in the trenches. We're not seeing it down in the trenches in our ConMon meetings, et cetera. We would love to give them machine readable audit data and ConMon data and no POAMs. We're just not seeing it. So what's happening to win their hearts and minds?
So half of those agencies that you just mentioned are on the FedRAMP board and are
Sub-agencies and
strong, right? But my point is that when something happens at the executive level, that doesn't push down to the implementer level. And that's where we talk about culture here. So right now you have a lot of ISOs, and often these are contractors that are working to a specific thing. They're told what to do and they are doing the thing that they're doing. They're not empowered to do something different. They're going to get yelled at if they don't go line by line through their spreadsheet. It's in their performance plan. So the long-term cultural change is that. It's getting the executives to start thinking about it differently so that they start telling their staff to start thinking about it differently, so that their supervisors start pushing things down, so that contracts get written different. This whole thing is a multi-year cultural shift. And a perfect example of that I have shared before, and I'll share all the time because it just blew my mind, was I was at the Department of Homeland Security in 2020 after Rev 5 had already come out from the SP 853, and I was in a training class for their senior leadership security folks for a certifying authorization professional cert that taught the SP 853 Rev 3. Like literally, I think it was done in 2014. And so this is the problem in government. That's not a problem that FedRAMP solves government-wide. FedRAMP lights the way. So that's what we're focused on doing, is lighting the way so that everyone else can come through and push things up. And there's one thing I see changing right now. If you're not seeing it, the incentives behind information security executives is different now. People have to deliver. You have to deliver. You can't deliver if your folks are tying everybody up in this stuff. So totally agree with the problem that you have. We'll light the way and hopefully changes down there. Yeah.
Hi, Robin Harris Walker, Applied Cyber Strategy Group. So Pete, given that the current KSIs do not have continuous monitoring parameters or reporting parameters, what is continuous monitoring going to look like for 20X when it comes to standard?
So this is the thing that like I need to figure out how to do this better. You all can help me with this. 20X is not the KSIs. 20X is 8 different standards, of which one of them is the KSIs. The KSIs sort of replace the controls, the 853. You know, like I'm that's not a at the 853. That's like I don't want you to think of them as controls, right? Like I want you to think of them as goals and a way to assess your security posture. But everything else is defined elsewhere. So significant change notification requirements explain how you monitor changes to your environment. The authorization data standard shows how you report this information. The vulnerability detection and response, that's continuous monitoring. And then on top of that, we have persistent validation and assessment, which is out right now. So the intent is that the KSIs themselves don't have to have that information, but everything around it creates that. So continuous monitoring is not in the KSIs because it's not necessary, because it's required by other standards.
Michael from Kuzara. So I got a question around a procurement. You said something very, I don't know if you said it on purpose, but you said it, is sponsorships going away. Now, let's just say I'm trying to sell or vice versa. I'm an agency trying to buy. What is going to be the new procurement model based on this whole new process?
So as it exists right now today, you need a sponsor for Rev 5. The Rev 5 process is sponsorship based. That's based on an agency authorization. The 20X process is program authorization. That's based on ours. So that's what I mean when I say smart. Like we're not doing program authorizations for Rev 5. If you still want to go the Rev 5 route, you got to find a sponsor. 20X will do the program authorization. So when it comes to procurement, the idea is to switch the game up a little bit. If you want to enter the federal market, do 20X, come to us, get your authorization. Now you're FedRAMP authorized. Go find an agency.
Now, will that be a centralized like location, like the marketplace, or would it be something?
Yeah, it will be a marketplace. It is a marketplace right now. It is a bad marketplace that we have some amazing folks working really hard on making that marketplace better right now so that we can turn it into something real. And we want that to be a real meaningful marketplace. But that is one of the statutory requirements of FedRAMP, that we have a place where people can go to understand what is FedRAMP, what the value of it is, et cetera. And yeah,
clarity.
100%.
Megan Hennessy, Anishan. I just wanted to kind of build off of the previous question of my colleague. So this year we have seen a massive cut in agencies' funding, and that's really directly related now to adoption of FedRAMP because they don't have money to buy new technology. And now we see a lot of that money going to the DOW. So with the end of reciprocity and this, transference of controls and security models and stuff, are you not worried about FedRAMP continuing on if there's not money in the commercial agency sector, but the money's going to the DOW?
So I'm not going to talk about money and what kind of money is available anywhere, because that's like a little bit over my head as far as like authorities, et cetera. But no, FedRAMP's purpose is to make it as cheap, easy, quick, and simple as possible for agencies to adopt cloud services, which reduces and for cloud services to get FedRAMP authorized. So that reduces the cost of cloud services for the government considerably. It's not just the cost that it takes to pay extra because I have all these requirements, but the cost to do the authorization, the reuse cost can be incredibly high. And that is why agencies, like there are plenty of agencies that have barely any cloud services in there. It's because they don't have the money. So if we make it cheaper, but better, but more secure, but more effective, hopefully that still opens the window.
Thank you.
More questions?
Hi, Pete. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you, guys. So my name is Yusuf. I am a senior director with JFrog. We're a cloud service provider. And we're planning to pursue or start the Rev 5 assessment in January. And now you're telling me that's going to go away. So kind of puts me in a pickle. So I think we'll qualify for the emerging technologies route. I think we might qualify for 20x, but Rev 5 has always been straightforward, compliance focused. You have milestones. To me, it's straightforward. So that's why we had decided to pursue that route. We have a clear sight. We can see a light at the end of the tunnel. So with the announcements you made today, do you still recommend we pursue Rev 5? Again, plan to start the assessment in 2.5 months, or change that path.
I'm not going to give you any business advice, just to be very clear. And nothing that I'm going to say here should be construed as business advice. So like, let's just make that really clear. You've asked me a very specific business advice question, but let me address the underlying sentiment, right? The issue. Is it right? Is it a good idea to go through Rev 5 right now when 20x is around the corner? And the answer to that depends entirely on your circumstances. Do you have a sponsor? Do you have a contract? Then yes, get it done, make your money, move on, start working on 20x. Are you trying to do a Rev 5 thing in order to potentially tap a market at some point in the future? Then you don't have access to the federal market. If it were me, I would probably wait. I would say I could get access to the federal market for cheaper, easier, quicker in 6 months. Maybe, but you're taking a risk. Either way, the path that exists right now, that is open to the public, that anyone can do and is dialed in, is the Rev 5 path. So how could it be a bad decision to go that path? Unless you really aren't sure you got ROI, and then why are you doing it anyway?
No, I get it. This is purely for saving you guys' time and hours. We have hundreds of federal customers asking to move off of our self-hosted to a cloud. That was the driver to go towards FedRAMP. We haven't really considered it for a while, but now it's existing customers trying to migrate out of self-host. They don't really care whether it's 20x or Rev 5. They just want to
they want
check that box so they can consume a cloud service. But if 20x is closer and it's hopefully more guidance comes out, maybe we can consider that. But I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a time where change is afoot, and in a lot of ways across the government, but just in general, things are changing. And maybe it's not the right time to expect things in the government to just be predictable and work the way they've always worked. Things are going to change. Timelines are going to go from 12 months to 1 month. Budgets will shift. Like, the best thing that you can do is be reactive. And this is why FedRAMP has made it a point to put this information out, to be completely transparent, to publish that roadmap, to talk about what we're doing and what we think about what we're doing. And like, be able to say, 6 months ago, I said I thought October I'd be on this stage announcing the FedRAMP 20x low was available to the public. And now I'm on this stage saying it's not going to be available to the public until March. And that's because we kind of had this agreement amongst all of us that you wanted to hear from FedRAMP in real time about what we were doing. And we said, in order to do that, we're going to add all these disclaimers around everything to make sure that we don't get yelled at and in trouble. So that is our goal, is we'll continue to make the information available publicly to the greatest extent possible so you can make an informed decision.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kenny from Barbaccia. It's great to see you, man. I'm glad
Are you going to
Okay,
ask me what
I
the
was-
what the end
Mike
levels
told
are?
me Mike told me not to ask this because of fear of ridicule. But I just really want to know what N means. And
Okay, all right. So if you've looked at the Vader, the vulnerability
you.
detection and response standard, and when it was finalized, you will note that previously there were impact category levels that were very boring, and we've been working on a few things on the FedRAMP space. One of those is trying to use different words and different terms for things when the old words and terms have too much baggage with them. And that's especially because of AI. And so if you ask about continuous monitoring with FedRAMP, you're going to get 15 years of cruft opinions, blog posts, etc. It's just very difficult to find the right answer. But if you ask about vulnerability detection and response, you will most likely start to get in things around the new Vader. So one of those things was that as we were categorizing our potential adverse impact levels, like what are we going to name our potential adverse impact levels? And I was thinking it'd be great if they were called N levels, because then the acronym for a level 5 is pain 5. And a level 4 is the pain 4, all the way down to pain 1. So as you assess how you need to respond to your vulnerability is based on the pain that vulnerability is going to cause you.
Okay. Thank you.